never ever thought I'd be sat here saying I'm the most confident, present, kind of empowered version of myself. I never thought this was possible. Like, genuinely never ever thought it was possible to be. But I do think setting those boundaries has played a huge part in helping me get to where I am today.
It's weird for a podcast host to say this, but stop listening to everyone else and listen to
Yes, that'll definitely get you some subscribers.
Yeah, that'll work. That'll do it. This is mental. I don't know if anyone here listens to the podcast or is aware of the podcast, probably some new listeners. This podcast was born out of something incredibly painful, very painful experience. A few years ago, I nearly lost my mum to an operation that went horribly wrong. She's now in a neurological care home, going through extensive rehab. And in the process, I completely crumbled, lost my identity and contemplated whether I wanted to be here at all anymore with the pressure of it all. And one day I decided I'm going to sit down, I'm going to start talking about it. Still to this day, I don't know why I sat down and recorded the conversation. Some might say it's quite a narcissistic thing to do, but it was more for accountability. And that was 4 years ago. So to now be in a position where I'm now at a festival, kind of my own little stage, hosting some incredible conversations and inspirational stories, like, this is mental. And I was petrified that no one was going to turn up, so I really appreciate you being here. I'm very excited. So the podcast is called The Waffle Shop, and as you'll probably find out very quickly, I tend to waffle about anything and everything that I can kind of get my grubby little hands on. However, today I'm joined by a very special guest who has been with me from day one, very early on of the journey. Yeah. Brilliant Sophie Beresford. You can tell your own story. I'm not doing that for you. But yeah, it's going to be the next kind of like 40 minutes of inspirational conversation, and I really hope there's something you can take away from it. Because yeah, I'm a big believer in kind of like, we kind of have a waffle about the smaller things, it stops them developing into the bigger things, and overall, everything's a bit more peaceful. So yeah, that was a bit about the podcast, a bit about myself. But this beautiful woman sat next to me, her name is Sophie Beresford. She's the founder of Like I Care, and I'm going to let you take it away. Would you like to introduce yourself?
So, hello everybody. I'm Soph, as you said, and I founded Like I Care, which is a blog, podcast, and I do events up where I live in Manchester. I started Like I Care in 2019. Little did I know that there was a pandemic around the corner and everybody'd need it. So, you know, I was kind of like ahead of my time in that sense.
Yeah, a good time to start this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure we'll talk about this in much more detail, but I've struggled with anxiety since I was in my late teens, which sadly evolved then into depression, and have struggled as a result with sort of low self-esteem and all those sorts of things, horrible things that come with it. So we can obviously connected through the Waffle Shop. I remember messaging you and thinking, I obviously need to promote the blog. I'm going to reach out to this guy. He seems very much on my vibe, but he might just completely ignore me. Little did I know, here we are.
4 years later.
I know, you can't get rid of me. I'm like a bad smell. So, yeah.
No, it's good. And it's incredible. And I think, you know, props to WowFest as well, because I think it has brought together a big community of people who just want to do better, they want to feel better. So it's genuinely an honour to be here in front of you lovely people. This all sounds very lovely and positive, but I do start each one of my shows with something called the Weekly Waffle, which is quite frankly something that has got on my goat a little bit. And then obviously if we don't talk about it, it makes me feel a little bit better. Now, what has been winding me up, obviously it's coming into, summer, it lasted a day, but I don't know, obviously I'm of a certain age, and there's a whole conversation between millennials and Gen Zs about socks. I don't know if anyone's aware of the conversations about socks, and if you're of a certain age, your socks have to be a certain length, and people can tell how old you are if you're wearing a trainer sock or a high sock. And it is starting to frustrate me because I'm at an age where I'm still clinging on to my youth.
Yeah.
So what size sock do I wear? And I just feel like it's a pressure that I don't need. There's a lot going on in the world.
Yeah,
I don't need
to be
the sock
thinking
pressure.
about your socks.
Yeah. So, yeah, now I feel better. So
I've gone for a long sock. I don't know if that counts for anything.
Look at you being all young.
Oh, it's long in?
Yeah, longer socks
wow,
means the younger you are, apparently. Yeah, someone at work who's in their 20s was like, oh, I can tell you're in your, I think, are we millennials?
Yeah, we're millennials, yeah.
They can tell that we're millennials because I wear trainer socks. was like, well, I'm wearing trainers. It makes sense for me to wear
Oh,
trainers.
it's just ridiculous. Bigger things to worry about.
Yes.
Now, isn't there?
Is there anything that gets on your nerves that you'd like to get off your chest today?
Do you know what? One thing that's really wound me up this week, you know, on emails, you've got the exclamation mark, which is urgent. People using that when it's not urgent has really, really upset me this week. So I got an email instantly because I've had a background in the kind of like comms and PR. And usually if you get that, it was an immediate inquiry. It needs to be out that day. So I get it and be like, right, I need to act straight away. So what I'm doing, drop it. So I got it this week. The deadline was 3 weeks' time. And I just was like, okay, next email. So you just need to action this for a couple of months' time. And I was thinking, if I get one more email that's got this on and it's not for today, and she was like, oh, it just reminds me to do things in my inbox.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's fine if that works for you, but then forcing everybody to work in the same way with somebody with a history of anxiety, it doesn't work for me.
See, I'm that person when it comes to this. I love a sassy email, like email sign-offs. I just feel like you can really tell a lot about a person with an email sign-off, like kind regards.
Kind regards, yeah.
They weren't kind.
Yeah.
Those regards were not
Best
kind.
wishes, not
yeah,
really, but
no.
yeah.
To whom this may concern.
Yeah.
How I hope this email finds
you
you
well,
well.
yeah.
No. Crying in the corner is where it found me. Obviously, we're going to dive into now the kind of topic of the talk, which is all about self-awareness, setting boundaries. And I think both of us are quite open and vulnerable when it comes to like sharing like our stories and like our journeys and stuff like that, and which I find is brilliant. But there is an element of when you kind of like you're opening up and you're being vulnerable, it kind of opens up the boundaries and almost the floodgates to like either you feeling a certain way or other people feeling a certain way. And, you know, when you are having that bad day, when you need to retreat, you need that kind of like self-care time. When people are so used to getting a certain version of you, it sometimes becomes a little bit of a problem. I wanted to ask you, because obviously you're very open with your journey, when it comes to setting boundaries, like do you have any advice or how do you navigate setting boundaries and sticking to them?
Yeah, so I think going from a place where I had no boundaries whatsoever to a place where I'm pretty fierce about my boundaries now, has just been such a transformational journey for me personally. And as you say, that kind of adjustment period between people understanding who I was and who I now am. So I was the type of, you know, daughter, granddaughter, or, you know, fill in the blank partner or whatever, that if you asked me to do something, there was no way I would say no. And it was a guaranteed. So naturally people gravitate towards you. And then you get kind of caught in this vicious cycle of, well, I can't let people down and they'll think of me differently, or somebody being surprised and their reaction if I did say no was, oh, I'll never do that again because I could see how much I'd let them down. So I think that going from that to testing the waters a little bit and saying no to things that maybe are a little bit less important, if you like, just to test it a little bit and actually seeing how empowering that is. So I remember one of the most vivid things, which I talk about a lot. So my dad passed away when I was 21, and my dad had brothers, but I felt like my granddad reminded me a lot of my dad. So our relationship kind of blossomed even more so than it had done when dad was alive. And I remember kind of feeling as though I'd lent into that role of taking care of him, despite the fact he had 3 other sons, you know, kind of being that person. And because I was already incredibly anxious anyway, I was constantly putting everybody else's needs above my own, including my granddad's. And I just got myself into a state where I wasn't even enjoying the time that I had with him, because I was almost resentful of the fact that I felt forced into doing it, and then I hated myself for being that person that sort of did that. So I remember speaking to a therapist I had at the time about it, and they said, well, what's the worst that's going to happen if you say you're not going to do something? And I'm like,
God forbid, I can't do that.
And I hadn't, and it sounds really, but I was like, well, I've not really thought about that before, but he'll be really upset and he'll feel like he's being abandoned and all this sort of stuff. And I'd really, you know, it was very much about how he would feel and all that sort of stuff. And they were like, just give it a go. And I thought, I'm never going to be able to do this. And I remember like almost sweating about it, being on the phone saying, basically, I couldn't go and see him. And bearing in mind at the time, he lived in Birmingham, I lived in Manchester. So I would work in the West Midlands for my job, but we'd be driving back and I'd try and squeeze in seeing him on the way back. That, quite frankly, I needed to go home because I needed to rest to then go out for another drive, you know, the next day. But I was like, no, it's really important to him that I go. And there was this one time I remember thinking, I'm just going to try and see what he says. And do you know what? If he gets really upset about it, then of course I'll go. So, you know, I'd obviously messaged him and said, actually, I can't make it this time. Really passionate upstairs.
Yeah, well, I don't know what's happening upstairs.
Yeah, not entirely sure what's happening upstairs.
Really concerned about that because I'm pretty sure they said that the room upstairs has a weight limit.
Yeah.
And if like there's only allowed like 20 people
yeah,
in
so we'll
there.
just give a signal. We'll stop.
Yeah, so we'll not be offended if anyone just suddenly needs to run out of here.
We're in it together. So I said no, and I was like bracing myself for what he was going to say, and he said, "Oh no, that's fine. Well, just let me know when you're next around." And I thought, what? No was possible all along.
Yeah.
You kind of I hadn't actually given. I presume it's typical kind of anxious behaviour of presuming what somebody's going to say before they've even said it. And when I had a little taste of that, how empowering it was to go, this is on spending my time on my terms, this feels fantastic. I'm going to test it a little bit more. And then I started doing it at work, started doing it with friendships, you know, all this sort of stuff. And before I knew it, I was like, this feels pretty great. Why have I never kind of lent into this before? Do you know what I mean? And it just built my confidence. They're getting more and more passionate, aren't they? Maybe they just feel like I'm really making a good point and they just really want to,
let's bang on the floor.
Yeah, hit it home. And I just started testing it. As I say, I kind of started off small and built up from there. And I kind of accepted that some people won't necessarily like that version of me, but I didn't like the version of myself that I was when I didn't have those boundaries. And your relationship with yourself is so important that actually I was willing to take that gamble and be like, well, my friends want to see me at my very best, and those that understand that this is me at my very best, having those boundaries will be there. And even though I've kind of lost some friendships, I would say that it's helped solidify the friendships that I do have and where my energy is sort of best spent. So I think starting small and building up.
It can be quite crippling as well. Do we have any people pleasers in the room? Yes, there's a lot of hands, a lot of nodding. It can be a very, very difficult thing to do. I remember there was a particular time when my mum was in a coma, and there was a long corridor, and I remember like almost waiting at the end of this corridor. When my mum, I didn't know what was going to happen, whether my mum was going to live or like die, walking up the corridor, like waiting for them to come up the corridor, and then I'd be the one to give them a hug to make sure they're okay. But it was like that something deep down inside me, like it was me who needed the hug more. And I think being on this kind of like wellness journey and having conversations like this, I think it's so important where you need to prioritize yourself. You know, you need to kind of respect your own boundaries and obviously other people's, but you need to do it. I think it's a matter of kind of, to be fair, I think it kind of can change the direction of your life. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm significantly more, I never ever thought I'd be sat here saying I'm the most confident, present, kind of empowered version of myself. I never thought this was possible. Like, genuinely never ever thought it was possible to be. But I do think setting those boundaries has played a huge part in helping me get to where I am today, because I feel like I'm able to look out for myself. Nobody's going to advocate for yourself other than you. And it was a really hard lesson to learn that. And now I'm kind of able to do that. And I'm always saying to my colleagues, you can say no to that. And, you know, your break's important and things like that, and kind of planting that seed, because I see it in other people. For example, if you're not having breaks, you're working out of hours, you're not actually turning up to work your best self, which means you're then going to turn around and punish yourself for not being in the employer that you want to be or performing as well as you want to be. So eventually you're the one that suffers. And if you want to think about it on a scale of, you know, how other people, in terms of family and friends, because I know that that can be particularly difficult. My time with my friends and my family is significantly better because I'm present. Whereas when I was running myself into the ground, when I was doing everything for everybody, I was so on edge all the time. I wasn't present. So they were chatting to me and I was somewhere else because I was so anxious and so I hated myself so much because I playing into, you know, kind of the not being able to set boundaries and hating myself for that. Now I can, you know, when we're hanging out, I'm completely present. I am listening to you again, which is something that I never thought I'd be able to do. And I used to hate myself for not being able to do that. And I didn't realise that how important the setting boundary side of things was to help make that happen, because I give myself the space that I need to be able to kind of recalibrate, if you like.
Obviously, we talk about like mental health and obviously with the stigma and that, like I'm kind of not going to go into that side of things, but I do think there is a stigma when it comes to self-care and like prioritizing like your self-worth, because I think it's kind of, it gets tarnished with this label of like it's selfish.
And also it's very commercialised of like, go to a spa. You can do self-care. A lot of my self-care, I was going to say rituals, but not really ritual, but like, I've had one cacao ceremony and I'm off, is they cost me nothing at all.
I think it's one of the things as well, like one of the biggest lessons from the podcast, like I've had these kind of conversations like many times now where your version of self-care is completely different to me. And it's one of the things that I really struggled with. And I'm not taking a shot at the NHS here at all in the slightest. I bloody love them. But the advice that I was being given when I first struggled with anxiety and like understanding like my depression, it was very much like go for a walk, like meditate and stuff like that. And the thought of sitting down at first, like trying to meditate, I would remember that stupid thing I said in year 7 when it was like, why did you say that? And this is supposed to be like really relaxing and really calm, and I just couldn't do it. But obviously with practice, like I got a hell of a lot better with it. But I think, it doesn't have to be going to a spa. It doesn't have to be kind of like these big grand gestures. It could just be, I mean, my biggest one now is Lego. Like for a huge like period of time, like I didn't really tell people, I don't play with Lego, but there's something very kind of therapeutic sitting down and like just kind of watching something start from this tiny brick into like this finished piece. And for those like 50 minutes that I'm doing it for, I'm not thinking about anything else other than what's right in front of me. Yeah. So I do think you have to find your thing.
Yeah, and there's that form of mindfulness, because I used to be the same with mindfulness and meditation. I was like, I know this is meant to work, but I get frustrated at myself that it wasn't working. And then I kind of learned that mindfulness and being present can be anything you want. As you say, it could be playing with Lego, it could be cooking, it could be, listening to music, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be one size fits all. And I think it's really important that we understand that. And I suppose that's the whole part of self-awareness, of going on that journey, I think, of who am I? Not being influenced by anybody else, but what makes me me, and regardless of what anybody thinks. Like, if you looked on paper as to what I'm interested in, how I dress, I do not fit into any sort of box. Yeah. Like we're expected to. Like, I'm a massive professional wrestling fan. Do I look like your typical massive professional wrestling fan? Probably not. And in fact, I know I don't, because when I went to Wembley last year, I was like, wow, I really do stick out here. But I don't fit into that. Obsessed with Viking programs. Do I look like that type of person? No. But, you don't have, it's really getting to understand who you are, again, is such an empowering experience, which then helped me with setting boundaries of being like, no, I am actually, one of my strengths is that I'm a typical Sagittarian, and we are, we're a fire sign for a reason. Yeah. And that is my strength, and I should lean into that and go, no, actually, I believe this, so I'm not going to agree to that, because that's not true to me. And you don't have to be aggressive with saying no. It's just that this doesn't serve me on this occasion, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that.
It's empowering, and to be fair, I'm going to give you all homework. So if you're leaving here today and you've got something, or you've been asked to do something that you might not want to do, say no. If the person who you're saying no to has an issue with it, I promise you, like, that's their issue. Like, you have to protect your peace. I think one of the biggest things from the pandemic is what was like, we were kind of we had all this kind of like the freedom taken away from us. Everything was out of our control. But what it did for me was I was able to focus on what I could control. And all of a sudden I was like, well, actually, I don't like any of that. Yeah. So I've just been doing it for the sake of doing it.
It's that thing of like, I used to have a conversation with the fact this is being recorded. I probably shouldn't say this, but let's just go with it. I used to have a group of friends that I grew up with, and it's that thing of like, you try and keep those relationships going for as long as possible. And I moved up to Manchester. They stayed in the Cotswolds, and I realised I was like, I'm doing a lot of travelling for them. What I'll do is I'll just put my foot down a little bit, again, kind of setting the boundaries of, well, where Manchester is, it's not in a different country, it's in the same country, so, let's see. That relationship with that group has completely dwindled, and I just think, I know that's really sad, and I do get moments for like, oh, it's so sad that didn't work out, but actually it's hugely empowering to turn around and go, do you know what? I know where my energy needs to be served, and it needs to be served with those people that are prepared to, recognise that I still live in England, let alone the UK, and travel up to see me, because it gives you that, I think it was very much feeding into myself of, you know, I'm obviously not good enough to spend the energy or the time in coming. And it's a sad process to come to those realizations. And some people I understand necessarily don't want to look into that. But it has actually helped me to recognize where my energy is best spent, which then empowers me even more, because you're in a slightly smaller circle, but of people that truly absolutely adore you and want the very best from you. So actually sometimes you kind of need to...
Yeah.
I was going to say cut away the fat, but I don't know if that's a...
No, but it's true though, isn't it? I think, and it's a very difficult conversation to have, and no one wants to have a difficult conversation. You know, it can be quite painful. You know, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable. However, to be fair, a lady, her name's Holly, she's actually speaking today. One of the best bits of advice she ever gave me was like, it's when it comes to like relationships or kind of like jobs or, you know, even friendship groups, and even some like family members to a certain degree, we are kind of stuck around them for like nostalgic purposes because we think we've been through so much together where we need to stick together. But it's that analogy of like holding on to a rope.
Yeah.
Like sometimes the longer you hold on to that rope, the more painful it is going to become for you to hold on to.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I'm going to say it, but my mum, God bless her, like obviously she would love to have been here today. And she said something to me like recently when I was whinging about like something really mundane about work. And she told me that I needed to Elsa that shit. And I was like, what? And she was like, you need to Elsa that shit. And I was like, what are you talking about? Obviously I didn't click what she was talking about. She was like, you need to let it go. She's like, it's not serving you anymore.
I know, originally I was like, what do you mean?
No, ages.
And then
I was like,
oh,
Elsa.
yeah.
I was like, what? I don't know I don't know what was going on.
Yeah.
But like, it's okay to let go.
Yeah.
And I think when, you know, we're talking a lot about like boundaries and kind of like self-awareness and stuff like that. And a lot of wellness, I believe, comes to having that almost self-respect to say like, I don't know, we just need to listen more. I think we're in a generation of, you know, it's weird for a podcast host to say this, but stop listening to everyone else and listen to like
that'll definitely get you some
subscribers. Yeah, that'll work. That'll do it. But like, it's okay to listen to yourself, like your needs, like your body. Yeah. Like I really, really struggled like with like my weight gain and like and stress, like, and I'm really going through this journey at the moment of really understanding why my body's behaving a certain way or why I'm behaving a certain way. And it was kind of like I was doing all this research and it was like, you know, Googling the symptoms, obviously it's the the worst thing you can do. But I was listening to like myself and like, well, actually this is affecting me a certain way. That scenario is affecting me a certain way. I'm particularly worried about that. And then I sat down, I wrote it in my journal and I was like, right, okay, less of that, more of that. And it was like, oh, it's almost annoyingly easy, but not at the same time. Yeah. So again, more homework, journaling. You know, if there is some certain things like particularly like worrying you or kind of giving you a hard time, write them down, cross them out if it's something that you don't want to do, and start listening to yourself.
There's a book called the Self-Confidence Workbook or Self-Love Workbook. It's one or the other. It's pink, like a pink and purple sort of cover. And it really took me through, as I say, what my values are, what's at the core of who I am, which then made it easier for me to be able to, when I was making those decisions about, do I want to invest my time here or is it better spent somewhere else? Actually going, does this sit right with me? And it really helped to kind of, for me, kind of validate why I was saying yes or no to things, and has really helped me to manage, you know, putting myself first, understanding myself, which then led to me liking myself because I understood who I was and actually going, yes, I'm aware of what my flaws are because we've all got them. And I can actually weirdly sit here and say, I'm fine with my flaws because I'm never going to be perfect. But I love my attributes now, which again, I thought I'd never sit here and be able to say that.
That's
usually
powerful.
I'd be like, oh, that's such an arrogant thing to say. It's like, well, no, you need to be able to understand and kind of like the bits of you that you do like.
You also need to clap for that. Like, it's like, I mean, I'm not asking you to clap, but like, you know, like clap when you win. Like, it's okay to self-validate. It's okay to like, you know, if you've done something good, give yourself a pat on the back, you know, buy yourself a chocolate bar, like just do something for yourself, because I don't think we do it enough. And I think it, again, falls into that kind of like self-worth and like boundary settings for yourself. Like, clap when you win. It's okay to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's quite, especially for a spritz, that's quite an uncomfortable thing to do, and it does take a bit of time to go, oh.
Weirdos.
Whereas actually now I go, you know what, Soph, your strength is being that person in the meeting room that goes, sorry, I just really don't think that fits with what we're trying to achieve here, or kind of holding people to account for what they've said, and being the person in the room that's really passionate about something and, you know, will fight for what's right. But then on the other side, you know, do I think a lot before I speak? No.
At all.
You know, sometimes does my passion take me a little bit, you know, too far? I'm aware of those things, but actually I think just, as I say, leaning into who you are and being proud of that. You don't have to, and that doesn't have to be the loudest person in the room.
No.
You know, the beauty of a team, whether you look at that as friends, family or anything, is the diversity of the people in the room. It's just finding your space within that, so you hold that space and actually say, you know, this is who I am, and I'm pretty, you know, I know I'm not flawed, but I'm, you know, pretty proud of who I am as a person. But you need to go on that journey of who am I in the first instance. And it can be a weird thing of like, I don't really want to focus on, you know, what I'm not great at, or, you know, and it can be a bit weird to uncover that, but what's on the other side is like a really beautiful
I think it's
thing,
where the
really.
fun stuff, I think that's when life starts lifing. I want to talk about your incredible blog, Like I Care, and I love it because obviously it's a play on words. Like you know, you really dive into some really niche topics and like powerful topics, whether it's self-care, you know, whether it's like gender. Like you've covered it quite a lot of like topics. When it comes to caring, now this might be a bit of a big question and a bit of a weird one to ask at a wellness festival, but like, do you think we're getting to a stage where we're caring more about talking about mental health than doing something about our mental health? And that's a little bit, I don't know if that's a controversial question, but it's kind of like...
I think it's become a very kind of saturated space. And what I mean by that is there's so much information that I can understand as a consumer, for want of a better word. I can imagine it'd be very overwhelming because you can have one person on this side saying meditation is the best thing that could ever happen to you, and you've got another person going, meditation will ruin your life. And I, you know, I only have to go through my news feed and think, oh, everybody's contradicting each other like all the time. So it's really, I think it is really, really overwhelming. But I think there's a difference, isn't there, between talking about it and actually putting that into action. And I'm such a believer. The reason that I started interviewing other people is my sister's best friend has PTSD. She was in a terrible car accident abroad, and she tried everything possible to help manage her PTSD. Nothing worked. And I started speaking to her about cold water swimming. So she got into it before it became what it is now. She started back in like 2016, I think. And I was fascinated about how much that's given her in comparison to the traditional things that we usually lean into when, you know, we go and see the doctor or whatever. And I just thought it just really highlighted that no one size fits all. And actually a lot of information we were getting out there through, you know, the NHS, again, not slamming the NHS, but what's available on those websites that we trust, sometimes don't work for people. And then they get to the end of that and think, well, there's no hope for me. And I think I definitely got to that stage where I was like, there's no hope because I've tried everything. So, you know. Yeah. And that sends you to not a very nice place. Whereas actually sharing stories of people that have tried different things to help themselves, I was like, this is something that could really help people explore something and could give them something. That's what it's always been about, is about giving people the information in an accessible way that could help them with no, you know, they don't have to pay anything to get it, all that sort of stuff. That's really important to me, to be able to, if you can connect to somebody and actually go, do you know what, I think I'll give this a try. And if it doesn't work, there might be something else. You know, I think that's really important with mental health, is just making sure that you find something that sort of works for you, because there is so much available. I mean, today, how many things are going on today?
Yeah,
some of them will work for some people, something, and that's kind of the beauty of it all.
I'm also excited to try it. There's a lot going on that I'm like,
because
okay,
you never know. You know, there's new things.
Yeah,
there's new things coming out, sort of all the time. So yeah, I think it's a lot of. It can be hard to not get overwhelmed by it all. You don't have to. You could give things a try, and that might work. But if something works for you, it's okay to kind of stick.
But it's the lesson there, isn't it? It's like someone else said this. It was actually, it's annoyingly brilliant. It was Paul Brunson from Celebs Go Dating. He was a guest on the show a few years back, and it's this advice again coming from like a conversation like this. He said, every situation there is two L's. It's up to us which L we take from every situation, and it's a loss or it's a lesson. Now, when you adopt that mindset, generally, like, it gives me goosebumps when I think about him saying it, because it really kind of it changes my mindset in any situation that might be quite testing now. Because I'm like, okay, it's very stressful, it's very difficult. However, am I losing anything? Or am I learning not to do it again? Or am I learning a different way to do it? And again, again, from a conversation like this, it's been a complete game changer. One of the big things, obviously, when it comes to coping mechanisms that we both kind of connect with is music. You got the music talent. I don't have an ounce of music talent whatsoever. So for someone who hosts a music and mental health podcast, it's quite embarrassing, to be fair. I've got the mental health, just not the music. And so obviously I've been joined on the show by people like Ed Sheeran, Sean Paul, Sophie Beresford, and we were very lucky to go to Glastonbury last year. Now, I love this question because I mean, I'm a bit of a music nerd anyway, but music has this power to take you to a different place. And to be fair, it's the same as like meditation or, cacao, like that ceremony kind of, I had a little bit of a moment there, like, oh, I need to wake up a little bit now because we're meant to do this. But it has the ability to take you away. And we shared a moment watching Guns N' Roses, and there was a song, I don't want to kind of bring up like that your dad was a huge fan of, and it was incredible. Recently, I went to Hyde Park, I went to see Shania Twain, and I was there with my best friend. Like, she's been through some stuff, I've been through some stuff, and Shania Twain sang She's the One. And no, not She's the One. That's Robbie Williams.
She's lost Robbie.
Still the One. And I don't know if anyone's listened to that song, like almost as an adult. Like, we've grown up around that kind of music. But as an adult, it's like, you're still the one that I run to. And in that moment of just like, even saying it now, look, it's embarrassing. The amount of goosebumps that I get from talking about music. But it was just, you know what I mean? It just really captures it.
Yeah.
A complete tangent there. But what I was supposed to ask was, if you were putting together the Glastonbury lineup, which 3 headliners would you go for, including the 4th all-important headliner, in my opinion, the legend slot? Who are you going for?
So I've thought about this since you mentioned it. I've been totally consumed by it because I've taken it far too seriously. And I thought, well, if it's my festival, I'm obviously going to put a lineup. Well, I feel it's an obvious thing to do. Pick a load of people that I've always wanted to see, as opposed to people I've seen. So, and also my partner when I ran through with him yesterday, he threw in a curveball and I was like, cheers, Liam, that's not helped me at all. So first off, I would have Waffle because they're one of my favourite bands, and I love a strong female vocal in a rock band, so that works perfectly for me. The second one, I was so torn because to me, I mean, honestly, this is the weirdest Ray. I love My Chemical Romance, which I don't know if anybody ever went through an emo era. Just
we all dabbled.
Gorgeous.
We all dabbled.
That G of Welcome to the Black Parade, feral. Honestly, it's just like it opens something else inside me.
Can you remind us of the...
What, Welcome to the Black Parade?
Yeah, no, could you remind us of, if anyone who might not have heard that song, could you give us a little...
Oh, I'm not doing a rendition now.
No, I tried,
sorry.
everyone, I tried.
Yeah,
I tried.
But yeah, but then I was like, are they big enough? So if not, I stole somebody's idea that we sat the other day of like somebody, it was Deck, stole an idea of somebody being on another stage. So I thought My Chemical Romance could be on before Muse so that I could get them both and they could do a collab. So technically Muse would be the headliner, but then My Chemical Romance could come on. Then I loved when we were talking about in the evening, that Elton John slot.
Yes.
So I thought he was the legend slot. Got educated, even though I was there, a year later that he wasn't. Fleetwood Mac. I know Christine's passed away. Yeah. May she rest in peace. And I've seen Stevie Nicks. I saw her on Tuesday. And I would just love to see them together, accepting that sadly Christine's not there. But I've always desperately wanted to see them, so I'd like to that. And then the legend slot is really upsetting because I would love to sit here and say one of my favourite bands, which is the Smiths, but I hate Morrissey. And that's like saying, I mean, nobody would ever say this, but like Destiny's Child, but you hate Beyonce, which obviously you'd never say that. Yeah, imagine. Oh. Yeah, we'd have a word or two. So sadly, I can't do that. So I'm going to go for The Cure because I've never seen them.
Nice. We're very different people.
Yeah.
Very different people.
Yeah, yours is completely different to mine. Very different vibes. Like I've not got a single R&B artist in there.
Yeah,
so
I would have gone full. To be fair, It changed. I was going to go Eminem Friday, but I don't know how I'm feeling about him at the moment. But Rihanna,
I don't know how you're feeling about him at the moment.
I don't know. I just feel like I don't know how I feel
Be
about
very
him.
careful what you say.
Okay.
It's now going to turn into a row.
Yeah, this is where we find out how good she is at wrestling.
I've got, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've learned a thing or two.
Yeah.
Also, this is my boundary. I will not allow
Oh, yeah,
you
okay.
to sit here.
Yeah, we're learning. We're learning. Rihanna Saturday. I feel like we need like the bangers back. Sunday again. I would have gone Fleetwood Mac.
We can agree on one. There you
yes,
go.
we'll get
it's
it.
not that different.
See, the power of conversation,
Yeah.
brings us together. But then Sunday legend slot, Spice Girls.
So I'm sorry. Right, who thinks?
No.
It's really no. Just let me
Yeah, okay.
ask the audience. Let's ask the people power.
Boundaries.
Who thinks Fleetwood Mac should be the legend slot? That they're the legends, not Spice Girls. Don't get me wrong. I love Spice Girls.
No, but Fleetwood Mac would be the headliner, but the legend slot would be obviously it's midday, and I just think midday at the pyramid stage, everyone in leopard print, sportswear, sleek black.
I think you've disrespected Stevie Nicks. That doesn't sit right with me.
No, she would do the proper. She would close the festival. But I just think the Spice Girls legend slot at Glastonbury. I just feel like us 90s kids. Well, it felt like just regardless of when you were born, everyone deserves that.
Agree to disagree. I think.
Okay. Well, mate, it's my show.
Oh, here he is. Here he is. The true colours come out.
Honestly, it's surreal because as soon as I put this mic on, I'm going to say it, but the first thing that popped into my head was to turn around and be like, it's Britney, bitch. Literally, this has been genuinely a bucket list moment for me. I want to thank, obviously, the brilliant Sophie Beresford for joining me for a waffle, but also to the team at WowFest for giving me the platform to do this, because it's genuinely, like, if you had told me 4 years ago that at the point where I was at rock bottom, that 4 years later, just by doing something as simple as talking and opening up and sharing my vulnerabilities and almost being scared of them, but now realizing that we're a hell of a lot more similar than we are different, and you know this festival proves that. It's going to be an emotional day, I think, but thank you so much, Sophie, for joining me. Thank you for the team at WowFest, and thank you, lovely lot, for joining me, because this has been a real bucket list kind of thing to do. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. My name's Taylor James. I'm the host of the Waffle Shop podcast. Enjoy your day, and thank you again for joining me. Oh, wow.